Hello, welcome to Defensive Basics, where we will talk about how to defend against a character. Here we're going to give you the quick, most important notes on things to look out for that should help you respond to common or basic Bryan tools, mix-ups, strategies, and so forth. Before we begin, if you're brand new to Tekken, I've included resource links in the video description below to help you with the terminology, etc. I highly recommend going through those before jumping into a guide like this. You'll also notice that we will be using Law for our demonstrations. He's extremely well-rounded with his punishers, crushes, parries, and so on, and he's a medium-sized character which helps show movement options. But be sure to look up your character's punishers and such before going further so that you can easily mentally insert the correct option for your character as we go. I know you want the good, so we'll keep the fancy stuff to a minimum. Let's get into it. A quick overview. Bryan is an amazing mid-range character with numerous heavy-hitting moves, particularly mids, along with incredibly scary counter-hit and crush tools. Overall, he has one of the best keep-out kits in the game. So getting in on Bryan is very tough, which allows him the initiative to come in on you. And when he hits you, he has an absolutely absurd Oki game centered around his taunt, particularly at the wall. That being said, most of his best moves are on the slower side, and he has a number of unorthodox tools that often require him to take some risk to get things going. Also, given the executional requirement to really unlock his potential, there are absolutely holes in his game that you can take advantage of. With that, let's begin. Bryan's weak side is his left, but thanks to an insane kit of homing tools in forward 4, 1+2, and down forward 4, all of which are safe on block, it can be tough to step him. Note that all of these are very negative on block, which should give you a turn, and forward 4 is a high. 1+2 has string enders, but both entail some risk, one being a high, the other being an unsafe mid. He also has some stuff that tracks to the weak side too, like sway 3 and down back 3, and at range, his linear moves still have a tendency to clip steppers. Regardless, you will want to keep up that step pressure, especially at range 0, since many of his most powerful moves are slow and or susceptible to step, like 3+4, forward 3, back 1, and his orbital. Force him to burn turns using the homing moves. On your approach, sidestep right and duck is a solid option for these reasons. Now for block punishing, we'll start with standing. At -10, watch for 2-3, down 2-3, and while standing 3, although note while standing 3 does have a second hit for cover. The down forward 1 machine gun punches, except for just down forward 1 by itself, are also -10, although the 2-ender is -15. So if you choose to wait for that, be prepared to launch it. At -12, sway 4 and crouch dash 1+2 are the most important to pay attention to, but he has a bunch of strings that you need to punish as well. Down 3+4 2, back 3-4, and 4-3-4 are all -12.
Down forward 3-2 and forward 4-1 are -13, although note that forward 4-1 leaves you in full crouch, so you'll need a while standing punisher for that.
If you don't have anything special at 13 frames, just consider them all 12 frame punishable. The only notable -14 move is 1+2-2, but this is launch territory for some characters, so keep it in mind. While standing 1 is a fun one since it's -16 with pushback and goes unpunished far too often, so be sure to know your long range punishers. For lows, the real important one is down forward 3. It's absolutely seeable, so if you can't block it on reaction, you better get to labbing. He will abuse you if you can't see that. Otherwise, sway 3 is -13, normally best to parry unless you have a really strong 13 frame punisher. His low pokes are all in the -11, -12 range, so unless you play one of the rare characters with a strong 12 frame while standing punisher, have your while standing 4 or equivalent ready for down 3+4, down back 3, and down 4. That or simply low parry them. Bryan has a few string games that he can play, but they all either lack an inherent mix-up or are simply timing based since he can delay a ton of those, think while standing 3 or down forward 2, or he can choose between a safe high ender, which would be duckable, and an unsafe mid ender. This is still largely a strength for Bryan since you never know when it's your turn, but if you're going to take a defensive guess, just remember to either duck or be prepared to block punish. Outside of down forward 3, which is reactable, the big low threat is sway 3. Everything else is a poke or part of a string, a la sidestep 2-3. While his pokes are good, none give him plus frames on hit, and they do pretty light damage. They're still good, but sway 3 is the low you gotta watch out for. He does have some highs to watch for, especially at range, namely forward 4 and forward 2. His move list is filled with power mids, so when he's closer, ducking is much riskier. At those closer ranges, your decision to duck should be based on what kinds of strings strings you've observed him using. If he's using a lot of high enders, it may be worth it to try to duck those. Again, be observant here. In terms of mixes, the scariest thing to watch for is his taunt. It does no damage, but it's a mid guard break that on impact gives him a 16 frame window to land an attack. In the open, the magic is taunt into forward back 2 at the wall. He can do that, but he can also do back 4, which is a perfect 16 frames and gives a free forward back 2 on hit, so massive damage. So if you tech roll, stand, or do a get up attack, the taunt will win. If you sit there, he can bail early on the taunt and do a grounded hit. Overall, it's very nasty and not really much that you can do about it. At first, test the execution to see if your opponent can do that hard forward back 2. Otherwise, you normally want to take the ground hit and hope that he commits to the taunt instead, and you can get up for free. There's really no hard counter to this, you just have to be patient against it. You don't want to give him that free launch if he can do it. For approach, Bryan has a couple of easy things he can do, like running 3 or forward 1+2. However, Bryan is built on counter hits and keep out, so he's largely going to try to anticipate you coming in on him and wait until you start being overly defensive. Once that happens, it's a simple dash game on his end. Your goal should be to bait out the keep out tools and try to punish. Again, the recovery windows on a lot of his stuff is pretty bad, so use that to your advantage. In other words, take what he gives you. Not much more to say about the wall here because we already went over it with the taunt. The only thing we haven't mentioned is more of a general note. Bryan's moves are really good at pushing you backwards, both on hit and block. Back 1, forward forward 2, forward forward 3, his strings, all are designed to keep forcing you backwards. How you defend against this is largely preference. Just try to figure out if he's going to use a slower move that you can counter hit, like back 1, or a high, like forward forward 2, or something linear that you can step. Bryan is a top tier character, so don't feel bad if this is difficult to do. Now, aside from his taunt, counter hits are Bryan's bread and butter. In all likelihood, he's going to score more wild counter hit stuff than taunts. This is because he has an absurd amount of counter hit launches or knockdown tools. A quick list: 1-2-1, magic 4, 3+4, down forward 2-3, forward forward 4, full crouch down forward 4, quarter circle back 2-4, back 1, forward 3, while standing 3, and while standing 3-4. And these are just the launchers. Now, some of these are for keep out, of course, but he has a solid kit to stop pressure too. Magic 4 we already mentioned. His 1-2-4 is a 10 frame NCC splatter, although it does end high, so watch for that. He has the orbital for a low crush. Not many strong high crushes, but his while standing punishment is silly enough now that he can just duck and punish. Plus, he has the punch parry. Again, just be careful swinging at him. Instead, do your best to wait for that risk that he's likely going to take. If he takes the risk with one of his strings, you gotta be Johnny on the spot and punish him for it. If he's giving you turns, like after 1-2-1 on block, go ahead and take it right away. You're going to need to know how he likes to counter hit your pressure when he's heavily negative, so it's worth not waiting until you can really sniff out a bait. This is in fact probably the one point that we can't gloss over. It is possible to get Bryan to play riskier, opening himself up to punishes and counter hits. Reason being that his generic tools are all a bit unorthodox. He has no hop kick or generic down forward 2, instead having to rely on a mix of orbital, forward back 2, forward 4-1, and sway 4. These are all good tools, but they're either on the slow side or difficult to use. He doesn't have a generic toe kick from standing, and it doesn't high crush. He doesn't have a generic down forward 1, instead down forward 2 is his safe I-13 poke, but it's much worse on block at -6, so he has to rely on the string enders to gain back initiative, which is a risk for him. In general, this is a Bryan theme. Although he has a ton of safe tools on block, they are either negative enough that he loses his turn, or he has to opt for a safer string ender that will end high. But obviously, this is a lot easier said than done, since this is again a strong point for Bryan, so don't feel bad about eating some counter hits. So for grabs, thankfully Bryan isn't super strong here. Both of his command grabs are 1+2s, although they do hurt if they land and they put you in a bad Oki position. So if you're weak in the grab break department, at least practice breaking between the normals and 1+2s. From there, not much to worry about. And finally, a couple of quick tips on taking risks against Bryan. First, test his execution. Forward back 2 is a legit 14 frame punisher, but it's all he has until 18 frames. If you have a risky but rewarding move in that range, test it out to see how he punishes. When you do that, be sure to duck afterwards. If he does forward back 2 and messes it up, launch him for the whiff. You should also test his taunt execution from Oki. If he can't do it, then the matchup just got a lot easier for you. On a similar testing note, Bryan doesn't have much special at 12 frames for punishing. His 10 frame options are fine, but he doesn't have the big 12 or 13 frame knockdown combo that many characters do, so you won't get roughed up too bad for doing moves that are in that range. Do note that his 13 frame while standing punisher is mid-high, so if you have some tricky -12 lows, test how he punishes those. Apply the same logic to while standing 1 if he messes up punishes with that too. But be patient and let Bryan come to you, since his keep out is too much to rush in and try to bully. Take advantage of the fact that his long range moves all have some weakness, be it a high or bad recovery and so on. Example, 3+4 is steppable and has bad whiff recovery. Use that to whiff punish or dash in and take a turn. And then on the topic of being patient, jab checking him will be your friend. His most powerful moves are typically slow enough that you can recover and block in time after a whiff jab. His only really scary high crush is down forward 3, which falls into this category. You have to stop him somehow, and jabs or some similarly fast high is as good a tool as any. And this brings us to the end of our Bryan defensive basics. To summarize what we just went over, first note that Bryan is a really strong character these days, and if you run up against one that has stupidly good execution, it'll get rough. But he does have holes in his game. The typical bully combo of 3+4 and forward 4 can be defended with proper movement and ducking. Checking with fast highs can be incredibly effective as well. Really hone in on the block punishing, because I guarantee that they'll take a risk with something, so you need to be ready for it. Also really make them prove to you that they have the execution. You'd be surprised how many Bryans aren't ready to do their own proper forward back 2 or forward 4-1 punishes. Overall, stay patient and don't give him a bunch of easy counter hits, which I promise will hurt. Just let him make the mistakes. The hardest thing for a Bryan to deal with is a good turtle. So keep labbing, and I wish you the best of luck. And with that, thanks for checking out this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on YouTube so that you get alerted when a new video drops. Twitch and Twitter links are also down below. Lastly, huge thank you to our patrons. The more support we have, the more resources we can devote to channel content. So again, I can't thank everyone enough for considering supporting the Patreon. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.